Welcome, idiots. This week we discuss culture, the interplay between religion and culture, how they can co-inform each other. We also discuss some personal stories about traveling and experiencing different cultures, why that can be a useful and valuable thing to challenge your perception and perspectives of life and reality. We also talk about open-mindedness. We again share some funny stories. We talk about delicious food from many different cultures, specifically Portuguese burgers or Portuguese chicken burgers, which I find delicious, and much more. So stay tuned, enjoy. And again, at the end, we go over the distillation and the nuggets. So hope you enjoy.
I find this topic super, super interesting. And honestly, in my experiences traveling, understanding other cultures and getting to know other cultures has always been the most fascinating thing to me. Like, I love going to, cool spots or like famous, places or buildings or whatever. But for some reason, like getting to know the people from that country and getting to understand the ins and outs of the culture has always really fascinated me, and just understanding like the differences. If we speak in like general terms, I would say Western culture is more about the individual, right? Whereas in many other Eastern countries, the culture is more about the community, right? And obviously there's negatives and positives to both, but I just found it so fascinating how the Western culture is all about like me, me, me. And a lot of Eastern cultures are about more about the community. And I think like that's a hugely large difference. And I also find that religion has a huge depiction on what culture is and how culture exists in the community.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but largely because culture and religion are very similar in the fact that they're all about sort of shared beliefs and aims and goals. And so to me, that's why they're very, like, they have that overlap, that's for sure. So when you were traveling, like you've been around the world to many different places and countries, what was the sort of like standout cultures for you that you found like enjoyable, or like there were a bit of, were they a bit of a shock at first, but then you surprised yourself at how much you enjoyed it, even though it was different from what you're used to, kind of thing?
All right, so we've talked about Thailand a couple of times on the pod. And I just think that that's one of the most impactful culture changes for me personally, especially because I was living there for almost 13 months. And I also worked there, right? So I was working as an English teacher, which is probably the most common job foreigners, or farangs, how Thai people say. Farang is foreign person. I think the word is actually, it's a French word or something. It stemmed from the French language in some way, but basically anybody outside of Thailand is a farang, or like any white person is a farang, I suppose. So living there was super interesting, and working there because I really got to understand the ins and outs of that culture. And I'll start by saying that they don't steal, like it just not in their culture to take things that aren't theirs. They're not like all about trying to live lavish lifestyles. They're very humble people, and they don't really look to sort of, do all these crazy adventuristic things. They sort of just like to just live life and be happy for what they have. And I actually got to test that because one time I was in Chiang Mai and I rented a motorbike. And the motorbike was it was a decent motorbike. I wanted to sort of treat myself this one weekend I went there. So I rented like a nicer one that was more than 250 baht a day, which I don't even know what 250 baht is anymore. But it's renting a motorbike in Thailand is super cheap. And I went to this art gallery in Chiang Mai, and I left the keys in the ignition of the motorbike in like this busy square the entire day while I was roaming around like this area in Chiang Mai. And I came back and the keys are still there. The bike is still there. And it's just like a testament to the culture. I also had a circumstance where I left my cell phone in a restaurant, and I came back like later that day, and it was still on the same table where I ate. Like, I'm sure people ate at that table after me, and so it was really, really interesting. But the most one, not the most interesting thing, but a peculiar thing I found in Thailand is they have this not this thing, but okay, feet are considered the lowest part of the human body, right? So Thai people,
Technically correct, yes.
yeah,
They literally are.
yeah, they literally are, right? So Thai people, because it's like the lowest part of the body and it's always like touching the ground, whereas the head is the highest part of the body and it's like closest to the heavens. The head is sort of considered more, I guess, more precious. I don't know if that's the right word to say. And the feet are sort of, I don't know what the right word is to use, but it's just the lowest part of the body. So if you were to point at someone with your feet, or if you were to touch someone with your feet, even if you have your shoes outside of your house, right, and your shoes are pointed at like another person's house, that could even be considered a little bit disrespectful. So there's a lot of interesting rules around feet, right? And when I was starting to work as a teacher, we had a week course where they were basically teaching us of some of these these things that the Thai culture has in order to give us, an ability to maneuver things. And that was one of the big points that they talked about was feet and how to not disrespect people with your feet. So when you're in a class and you have students sitting on the ground, you're not supposed to step over anybody, right? You can't step over someone's book. You can't step over someone's bag. You can't step over someone's foot. You have to either move things out of the way so you have a clear path, or ask the students to move them, because you're not supposed to like step over anybody under any circumstances. And also when you go to temples, you have to take off your shoes before you're allowed to walk in as well. So there's a lot of like interesting things with the feet. I guarantee there's no foot fetishes. Feet. What's that?
Yeah.
Guaranteed no foot
lots
fetish.
Of subtleties with the feet.
Yo, imagine asking a Thai broad, yo, can I fuck your feet? Or you down give me a foot job? She'd be like, oh, how could you? Oh my God.
Damn. Unless she was really kinked and she was like, oh, daddy, you're so dirty.
Yeah. Fuck the lowest part of my body.
Yeah. I think, was it like sacred versus less sacred? I think you were trying to like with the head. Like the head's probably more sacred. The feet are less sacred. Kind of thing. It's interesting too. Okay, so you mentioned feet with the Thai people. Your feet actually age at a slower rate than your head does because of gravity, and your feet are more proximal to the ground or closer to the center of the earth, so they experience less time, and your head experiences more time. Weird side note, but yeah. So Thailand is your pick. Yeah, that's what you reckon. That really surprised you. You loved it over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many other things we could talk about Thailand, but yeah, I would say overall, just because I was there for such a long time. What about you? Where's a place you've been where you were sort of shocked by the culture?
Shocked by the culture? I'm going to do a broad topic, which is like Muslim countries. I was really shocked when like I had a preconceived idea of, like I had a certain bias towards what I thought it would be like in Muslim countries. And I was really shocked. Like a lot of the Muslim countries I visited, specifically Malaysia, like beautiful and beautiful people, and and other like Islamic or Muslim countries. I was really surprised at the, again, it's like you mentioned, it's less of a us or me, and more of a us kind of thing, or a higher power. And I think it's possibly because in the Western world sort of drifted away from the religion a bit more, whereas those other countries sort of like are tied to their religious beliefs in that regard, which influences their culture. But yeah, I just loved it. And the camaraderie and the sort of the sharing of experiences. Like I was really surprised at how they engage in such like seemingly like from the outside boring community activities, but they're actually really beautiful and meaningful and nice. Kind of nice to just like hang out and shoot the shit. And I don't know. I was really, really surprised. And being in Malaysia and actually going to like a traditional wedding was an amazing experience. I just loved that. Like there was such a beautiful experience to just get together and like like we have the groomsmen in Western culture, like the best men kind of thing. And I've been to a few weddings like that and participated, and it was kind of fun. But it's normally about like getting really fucking drunk a couple of nights, like the night before the wedding, and then like getting drunk on the day, and then fucking all this, a different culture, right? Whereas over there, obviously the drinking's not a big thing in Muslim culture. Not permitted. But like we sang and we did like performances, and like it was just a completely different experience. And as like my preconceived idea of it was blown out of the water with how actually amazing and enjoyable and fun it was. But yeah, I don't know. It is very similar to what you said about the Thailand with the us. Like it's much more sense of a community, and there's something beautiful about that, and it does come from that tradition. And I think we've kind of lost, or we just don't have as much of that rich tradition. It's not as old, I suppose. But yeah, that would be my one. I was really surprised with Muslim countries. I thought that they would be very backwards and a whole bunch of other stereotypes. And when I went and experienced it, I was completely blown away at just like how beautiful it actually is and how nice it is. And it's so calming too. I don't know. I just felt really calm and relaxed. And there's like less of a sense of urgency over there. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Have you been to any Muslim or Muslim countries?
Yeah. Malaysia. I've been to Malaysia as well.
Yep.
I thought Malaysia was really, really cool. I'm sure I've been to other ones, and I'm not 100% sure if they are Muslim countries or not. It's on the other side. So it's next to Thailand. It's not Laos, but it's on Myanmar or Burma. Is Myanmar a Muslim country?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think it might be. But dude, Myanmar or Burma, I'm not really sure what it goes by anymore. Dude, that place was wild. That was an eye opener. And I went there when I don't think you were supposed to be really traveling there. It's not like they were having a travel ban, but there's like a civil war there was going on in Myanmar, right? Or there was, or I don't know if it still is, but they were having some issues, and I wasn't even aware about it, and I went.
Buddhist country.
What's that?
Predominantly Buddhism is the main religion.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I'm not so sure of what other Muslim countries I went to. I know, is Indonesia partly Muslim?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's like it's a decent breakdown. Let's have a look. I think Indonesia is Buddhist, Hindu, and let's just have a quick look.
Do you think religion is a prerequisite for culture?
Well, okay, so yes, because, but maybe not in the sense that most people think. Okay, so Indonesia, 86% Islam, 10% Christianity, 1.7% Hinduism, 0.8% Buddhism, and 0.1% folk.
Okay, I'm gonna have to straight up look up what which countries in Eastern Asia, or maybe you can just type this in quickly if you got it up there. Which countries in Eastern Asia are Muslim? Because when I was in Thailand living there, I went to like 12 or 13 different countries in that area. So I'm sure one of them or a few of them had to have been predominantly Muslim. For some reason I thought Myanmar was. I don't know why.
Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, East Timor, China, Philippines. That's about it. That's what I got.
I've been to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Philippines is really, really nice.
Philippines is beautiful. Yeah, agreed. Okay, so you just asked an interesting question. Do I think religion is a prerequisite for culture? Like, I think shared beliefs is a prerequisite for culture, and I think that a definition for religion is shared beliefs. So, like, yeah, essentially in that regard. I've actually got like a little bit of an intro to culture. So, a bit of a definition. Culture refers to the shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that members of a society use to cope with their world and each other. These elements are passed down from one generation to the next, shaping the way individuals perceive and interact with their environment. What are cultural components? There are two main components of culture: material culture and non-material culture. Material culture includes physical objects such as architecture, clothing, and tools, while non-material culture encompasses intangible elements like values, norms, beliefs, and symbols. Cultural values. Values are the shared principles, standards, and morals that guide behavior within a culture. They often dictate what is considered right or wrong and may vary greatly between different cultures, hence cultural wars and the rest. Cultural norms. Norms are the shared expectations and rules that govern behavior within a society. They can be formal, like laws, or informal, like social etiquette. I suppose that's your foot example in Thailand. Cultural norms dictate how individuals should behave in certain situations, and they can evolve over time. Cultural diversity. As you explore culture, it's important to recognize and appreciate the vast diversity that exists among different societies. Each culture is unique with its own set of values, norms, and traditions. Cultural diversity is an essential aspect of human experience as it fosters creativity, innovation, and adaptation. Cultural change. Cultures are not static, they evolve over time. Cultural change can occur due to factors such as migration, technological advancements, or contact with other cultures. The dynamism contributes to the richness and complexity of human societies. Two more to go. Cultural relativism. When examining other cultures, it's crucial to practice cultural relativism, the belief that a person's beliefs and activities should be understood in the context of their own culture. This approach helps prevent ethnocentrism and encourages more open-minded and empathetic understanding of cultural differences. Cultural studies. To develop a deep understanding of culture, it's helpful to study a variety of disciplines, including anthropology, sociology, history, and linguistics. These fields provide valuable insights into the many aspects of culture and can help you develop a well-rounded perspective. So, I think that pretty much says what we said. Like, it's just amazing and interesting to observe and appreciate the differences and the nuances, right? Like, that's kind of like what's fun about going and traveling to different places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when people think about culture, like the most basic term of culture, I think it might be based on, not based on, but essentially art, right? So like music and clothes and like style of art, as well as cuisine, and also social
what was that word,
norms.
guy?
Cuisine.
What was that word? Cuisine?
How do you say it? Cuisine?
How do you say it?
Fuck. Dude, listen, I've been speaking predominantly Spanish for the last 4 years, so my English is slowly getting away from me.
Cuisine. Yeah,
Cuisine?
No, it's just interesting. Yeah, I like
Cuisine.
it. Cuisine. Yep.
You know,
I say more of a Q.
That's true. You know what? I think I get that from my mom. So my first language was actually Polish. I grew up in a Polish household where my mother and father spoke only Polish, and I learned English in school. So when I started school in Canada, I actually had a Polish accent. Is what I've been told.
It?
What's that?
Can you do it?
Yeah, this is how you speak in Polish. Okay.
You were in kindergarten like this.
Yes, I was in kindergarten and I was speaking with the teacher like this, and the teacher was fascinated. You see, you sound like your father.
Yeah, you must have big balls.
Yeah.
Your
what
balls
happened?
dropped in
What happened to
kindy.
my fucking balls?
Yeah. You lost your Polish heritage, guy. Damn. But sorry, I derailed you. Go. What were you saying?
No, it's all right.
Cuisine.
Yeah, I don't even know how. Now I can't fucking say it, guy. Cuisine. God damn. I've been saying, I've been saying cuisine, and I've been saying yesterday my whole life. Yesterday. Yeah, it's
Yesterday.
yesterday. It's yesterday, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that's how it's spelled. Yes.
Yeah, I get that from my mom. That's because like that's how she still has like certain words where she has an accent on. But then what I think it is that I'm so used to hearing my mom speak, so I probably don't pick up on her accent as well as someone who doesn't know my mom, possibly, maybe. But with my dad, I mean, he has the heaviest accent, and that you can have. He's never lost it, and he's lived in Canada since 28 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, what I was saying was art is basically art, not art. Culture is basically art, cuisine,
Yeah.
and social norms. I think like if you at the foundation of it, I think.
You with shared beliefs. Very similar to religion, right? Like that's all that a religion is. In that little definition, it said there were physical, just I'll double check. Yeah, physical and non-physical aspects of it, right? So the cultural components, material culture and non-material culture. Material culture includes physical objects such as architecture, clothing, and tools, while non-material culture encompasses intangible elements like values, norms, beliefs, and symbols. Like that really, I think that does a really good job of summing it up. So it's interesting to see, like when you travel, the overlap between certain cultures, the divergences between others, and then sort of like if you're agnostic, I suppose, towards them all, it's actually beautiful to experience the differences. And as long as you're not going into like, when you're traveling the rest, like, oh, I have this notion of right and wrong, or if you keep your mind open and you're willing to try to understand, okay, well, why do these things happen? Why is it that they do these certain practices, or they believe these certain things, or they value these materials, or they have their architecture this way? And you're inquisitive. I think it's just, it's beautiful to experience, and it opens you up. It allows you to gain new and different perspectives on how to perceive the world and the universe and how to interpret different things. Because, if you just grow up in your one local environment, you sort of just get, you can easily become biased to thinking that that's the only way to interpret and perceive the world and to be in the world. Whereas by traveling and going and experience these different things with an open mind, it allows you to sort of take like what you perceive to be the gold or the valuable or the useful things from different cultures. But also, I think it increases your ability to appreciate that life isn't this binary, like that's right, that's wrong kind of thing. There's a whole spectrum of that. And based off your beliefs and your epistemology and your values and your culture and your religion and everything else sort of defines that for you. And that even within those systems, there's still variance, right? There's all these different ways of doing it. And is any one of them right and all the others wrong? No, they each have their own uniqueness and nuance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a mistake to go and travel to another country having expectations, especially if you're going to have expectations that are sort of comparing to what the norms are of back home in terms of just, services and I'll give you an example, actually. If you go to a restaurant, right, the food service is going to be a lot different than what people are used to. I know that in like America and Canada, Australia, there is, actually I haven't been to Australia, so I can't speak for Australia. But
I'll tell you, you tell me about America and Canada, and I'll say whether or not.
Well, the service in Canada and America is really, really, like the level of service is really high. Like you go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress is on it, and they're attending you with like a very high quality of service, which you don't really find in Europe to the same extent. You won't find in Eastern Asia, even close to the same extent. And I think sometimes people, it's just like one example, right? I think sometimes people travel to other countries and they have sort of like this expectations and they get annoyed with the service, but you have to understand that when you go somewhere else, it's literally somewhere else. It's a different world. Like it's a different country, different culture. And you have to leave your expectations at home, and you have to go with an open mind, an open heart, and don't start comparing things. Oh, well, in Canada, it's like this. And like, oh, this would never happen in Canada. Of course, Canada is a very organized, well-structured, also an intense system, right? Obviously, it has its flaws, but in Thailand, for example, they don't have the same rules and regulations. If you're a Thai person, you can literally start up a restaurant tomorrow. You can cook chicken at home and then go out on the street and sell it wherever you want, on any corner. You could even go.
So you can cook the chicken on the corner.
You can cook yeah.
You could just light a fire.
Yeah, you don't need a license to do it. You don't need anything. You just need to want to do it, right? Colombia is the same thing. You know, many countries, it's like that. But if you tried selling chicken from your house in Canada, people would think you're crazy. Nobody would buy it. Like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with Polska selling chicken out of his garage? Like, is this guy nuts?
I agree with you, but also, if your chicken was good enough, I think people would fucking buy it. Supply and demand, guy.
Yeah.
Supply and demand. I think what you said about expectations is important and interesting, but I think we can make it more of a meta point, which is like learning about your expectations just in general with everything in life. Like, it's only really when you have expectations and they don't get met, or that sort of, so if you have really high expectations, you're essentially setting yourself up for disappointment continuously. Whereas if you expect the worst, all right, and you have low expectations, or expect the worst out of it, you're more likely to be surprised. And so it's just like a nice, I don't know, it's like a nice way to be. I started doing that for myself. Like I used to have like expectations. I get really disappointed because like I expected you to do this and I expected you to do that, and then I realized like I'm the idiot for expecting all these things. Like, that's stupid. If I just expect the worst and expect like literally the worst of people, and sort of plan for that in some sense, I actually got surprised way more often. I was like, oh, awesome, you didn't fuck me over, or you didn't do this thing, or you didn't. Your service was way better than I expected. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's a way to hack the system in a sense. Now, I'm not saying like, get rid of all your expectations all the time. Like in certain circumstances, you need to have some expectations. But like you mentioned, when you're traveling and doing that, just like sort of wipe your expectations off the board kind of thing. Like, or expect just the absolute worst and get surprised more often. I don't know. Good. I just found it's a cool hack.
I remember I came back from Thailand after being there for almost 13 months, and I was so calm. I was just completely, just really calm. I was more quiet. I was still like sort of me, but I was just like a really toned down version of me. Before I went to Thailand, I was really intense and yelling in everyone's faces and going crazy and shit. But then being in Thailand for so long, like it really, really calmed me down. And I remember coming back to Canada and thinking like, yo, everyone's really intense over here in comparison. And it took me a little bit to adjust, actually. So it was like a really beautiful thing that I learned from the Thai culture is it's just like being calm and appreciative of the simple things.
But how did you get that? Like, what were the sort of what were the principles, or what were the experiences, or what was the like what were the sort of certain things that led to that happening? Like, was it certain practice? Was it a different way of viewing things? Was it more about that focusing on the us, less about the me, that kind of stuff?
So my first week there, I learned this saying, and I can't remember what it is. It wasn't sabai sabai. No, I can't remember what it was. But basically, it's just like the English version of like, no worries, it's all good. And many people told me like, oh, like that saying is basically the staple of the Thai culture. Like, if your business burns down, it was just like, oh, like no worries, if if you lose a bunch of money or you lose your job or you get in a motorbike accident, it's just like oh, no worries. It's all good. And Thai people don't really get angry at things. They do the opposite. They laugh. Like my friend got in a motorbike accident and it was his fault. And it was just like a minor one. And the Thai person's bike got kind of fucked up and he was just laughing. He says his experience was the guy just got up and, no worries, just laughed. And that was it. So people's reaction.
Was it really his bike? It's just like, fuck it, it's not even my bike, bro. Don't worry.
Okay, I actually have a good story. So I worked in Tabo. Tabo is in northern, and this is a story about how I learned like the level of calmness Thai people have. Okay, so Tabo is on the border with Laos. Across the so the river there is the Mekong River, I believe it's called. It's like a huge river that runs through Thailand, and it borders Thailand and Laos. And from Tabo, you can actually see, I think it's called Vientiane, the capital of Laos, right? So Tabo is like this little village in Thailand, and I worked at English school there for 6 months. And there was this British guy, I can't remember his name, and he's been an English teacher there for a couple of years. And he was one of the craziest motherfuckers I've ever seen. And this is another thing about Farangs or foreigners in Thailand, man. Like we get a bad rep because there is a lot of like crazy motherfuckers that go there and basically use and abuse the culture there. And he was one of these guys. So there was so many stories of him like getting in trouble with the police and everything. But this one night he goes to the bar and he's getting lit the fuck up. He gets in an argument with the DJ because the DJ is not playing anything he's liking. He ends up getting into a fight with the DJ. All right. The cops are called. The cops show up. He ends up fighting with the police. Okay.
Oh, nice.
He gets into
it's gonna end well.
A fist fight with the police. They finally get him out of the club. They bring him to jail, right? And they let him out the next morning. No fines, nothing. They knew he was a teacher at the school because they've ran into him before in, similar sorts of circumstances. Another time he was driving hammered on his motorbike and he got in an accident. So this guy, he's committing crimes, right? Like, I mean, if you fought the police in Canada, dude, you know what I mean? Like if
God, you're not even allowed to protest in Canada. You can't even protest without getting fucked up.
So he was doing all these things and it was always just like a slap on the wrist because teachers are well respected in Thailand. And that just showed me like, wow, like, okay, I understand the respect part, but they don't give a fuck about these. I guess in a way it is sort of little insignificant. I mean, well, is it really insignificant if it's continuous with him? I guess not. But for some reason, they just kept letting it slide with him and slide and they would go on and on. There was, like I said, there were so many stories with this English dude just fucking shit up in that town and then getting a slap on the wrist for it.
I met many people who have fucked shit up in Thailand. I went through a small period where I sort of fucked a bit of shit up in Thailand, but nothing like that. I wasn't out there trying to fight people. But it's a great, as a younger person, it was a great place to get really lit and have a great time. Like everyone is loose and it's much more relaxed over there. You can get away with a lot more and interesting observation from when I was there for the first time at a younger age is what I noticed is because of that sort of looseness with the laws and the rules and regulations, and a little bit more accepting of people's sort of, I don't know, nuances and kinks and that kind of stuff was, and this was hard for me to really deal with. And it sort of like put a bad taste about Thailand in my mouth for a bit, like it sort of put me off. Was we'd be out, like you would go out, and it wasn't uncommon to see older people with very young, like children age people. And you would think like, this person's of a different nationality. That can't be their child. Like, what is that sort of environment? And then, so you sort of, you question that when you see it in the daytime or in the public, in a cafe or something, or a restaurant. And then you go out at nighttime and you see a very similar thing. But then you have very young people, like young girls specifically in my case, and I'm sure it happens with young boys as well, would come up to you and try and like, pick you up. And obviously that's their job. They're working, so to speak. They're obviously some sort of, sex worker. And I just remember thinking to myself, like couldn't be older than 12. Like this is a very young age to be doing that. And then they'd lie, I'm 21 or, like whatever. And you're like, there's no way that you're a 21-year-old person. There's no way there's 21 years of development in that body. And I always found that really strange. But what made it even stranger for me was how often people would actually take them up. So you would say no, and you like avoid it. And then 10 minutes later, you'd see them walk off with somebody else. And I always found that was a very interesting, it was a tough pill to swallow. That like I wasn't, like I knew these things sort of happened in the world, but to see it firsthand was very, very confronting in that regard. And I must say that as beautiful as Thailand is and all of that, there is that sort of aspect to it. And it's kind of like with the freeness and the not giving as much of a fuck about these little things creates this space for all this other, beautiful and fun or whatever. It also creates a space for that sort of downside as well. And I don't know if you ever were exposed to any of that kind of stuff or saw any of it, but man, I saw some crazy stuff.
Yeah, I did, but I have another story if you don't mind. I'll start by showing this picture. Can you see it?
Oh, nice guy. Polish heritage.
You see the gun?
Yeah. How can you not see the gun?
I just wasn't sure if it was clear or not.
The gun is as big as you, okay?
So, my neighbor in Thailand, he was running this police station, like he was the boss there. And he was also an alcoholic, him and his wife. And what he would do is in the mornings, he would drive over to the police station. He would sign in as if he's working, and then he'd come back home and he would drink all day with his wife. And he would do this every day. And he never got in trouble for it because he was the boss there, right? And again, like I lived in like the boonies in Thailand. So you could imagine, there's not many, there's laws, but it's less
enforced.
So that's what he would do every day. And sometimes I would hang out with him because he was just really funny. I never understood anything he was saying, and he never understood anything I was saying, but we would just like sit down together and like shoot the shit anyways. In Thai culture, when you go into someone's house in Thailand, they don't have like sofas or beds or chairs, tables for that matter. They'll have like these rice mats, these thin little rice mats.
Another ones.
Yeah, and they put on the floor and they sit there, they eat there. And then when it's time to sleep, they'll pull out these other mats that they put on the floor and they'll sleep on those mats. Generally speaking, Thai people don't have furniture. So each time I was at his house, we would sit on the rice mat floor, right? And he had this big box, this cardboard box. And he just went over there and I didn't know what he was going there for. He starts pulling out a couple of clothes and out comes this fucking gun. It looks like an AK-47 to me. I don't really know much about guns. He pulls out that gun and he gives it to me, right? And I'm fucking terrified, dude. Like, I've only held a gun once before, and it was in a controlled setting. But he just handed me the gun, and he's drunk, right? And I'm like, I was really scared, didn't know what to do, but I'm like, yo, fuck it, whatever. Like this is the police chief I'm with. I'm good, right?
Yeah.
And he takes a couple of pictures with me holding the gun with the hat on, like you can see in the picture. Anyways, it's New Year's, okay? It's New Year's night. Buddy's hammered, takes out the gun New Year's night, and like in our house complex where we lived, he loads it and he starts shooting in the air when it hit midnight. The police chief of Tabo shooting off his gun New Year's, dude. It was crazy. That like they just don't give a fuck. So going back to my previous point, that just like all of these like small and big things compiled just made me a calmer person, even though like that experience is not very calming, but it's just that not giving a fuck attitude is what helps me become more calm.
Yeah, no, I think there's you approach it right in a certain way. You think like, oh, we have to give all these fucks because all these other bad things can happen. And then you go over and you experience somewhere where they give way less fucks. And then you realize like, oh, actually, doesn't always end terribly. Like it actually creates a space for kind of some fun shit to happen and all this other stuff. And it's like all these things that I thought would have ended really horribly actually didn't end that horribly. Not to say that that's always what happens. I'm sure there's plenty of stories where that didn't go as well and somebody got shot, like that's probably, something that's happened. Okay. So when we were I've got another Thailand story for you. We were down at the beach. So we were staying in Phuket and we were down at the beach. I can't remember the name of the beach, but anyway, we're staying at these beach clubs and we met these like Rastafarian Thai guys, right? Like little Thai guys, mad dark, but like dreadlocks and like they look like full blown Rastafarians from, Jamaica or somewhere, Anyway, we started getting on with these guys. I couldn't understand a fucking word they said either. Well, we just like having a great time, like you said, like shooting the shit, and it's hilarious because we're talking. They don't probably understand us. They're talking. I had no idea what they were saying, like word wise. I could sort of infer some stuff from their body language, but it's not an exact science, is it? But like we were just having the greatest time. Anyway, they pull out some ganja, right? And it's all like tied up in like cotton and like they must bury it underground or something. I don't know. It's this whole big thing. Anyway, so they start rolling these big joints and we start having a few puffs of the joints with them, right? We're drinking and having a great time down at the beach, throwing like a frisbee around and shit. And they own this bar, right? And they end up getting so lit, like these Rasta dudes got so lit that I was like, oh, I want some more drinks. He goes, you go get the drinks, like you serve. And I'm like, well, how do I pay it? He goes, just put it in the till, like that's essentially it's just like, I'm like, oh, I'll put the money in the till. And he's like, yeah, like agreeing. And so it got to the point where like me and my cousin were actually like, we were serving the drinks at the bar because they were so fucked up. So we were like taking people's money. We were putting it in the till. We're serving these drinks because these Rasta dudes were just lit, having the best time. But again, that's that not giving a fuck, right? Like they were just like, you two random white people that we've just met, you got a good vibe or whatever. We trust you based off, 3 hours of hanging out with you or 4 hours of hanging out with you. You can now go and like manage our till. Like what? That is like, but they, like there's just countless stories like that. Like that happened so many times while we were over there. You just like meet these people one day and you're just like instantly best friends kind of thing. Very fun. But yeah, Rasta dudes in Thailand are lit. They are so much fun. We had the best time.
I met some Rasta dudes down there too, actually.
In Phuket?
In Krabi. Not in Phuket, in Krabi.
Okay. Well, I might have been around Krabi too, yeah.
Yeah, because Krabi is quite close to Phuket, right? I think it's like a 3-hour boat ride, if I'm not mistaken. Krabi is a cool area. The only issue with sometimes when places get oversaturated with tourism, it sort of changes the culture a little bit too, right? So I remember there was this one bar in Krabi where they actually sell joints. So Thai is really interesting because once in a while you find a place that sells joints and mushrooms. Meanwhile, drugs are like very, very illegal in
Not anymore
Thailand.
though.
That's
Not
true.
anymore. Yeah.
That's true. It's
But yeah,
changing, right?
yeah, from when you were there and when I was there, it definitely was the case. It was yeah, more taboo.
Yeah. So I was always scared around being around drugs in Thailand, to be honest with you. But we're at this bar and we buy some weed, we buy some drinks, and we're there for maybe an hour listening to music. And the servers come by and they're just like, in their Thai accent, they're like, Odomo, Odomo. That was a terrible Thai accent. But
Yeah.
they they kept telling us to order more, like it wasn't enough. Like not enough, not enough. And we're like, yo, like they want us to keep buying drinks, right? And it sort of turned us off from that bar. And the reason why it's like that is because it's so saturated with tourism in that area that they've come accustomed to having a huge turnover in clientele, right? So that's sometimes the issue with places that get way too saturated with tourism. It does sort of have an effect on the culture.
We'll we can link this to Moloch, but I got to do a wee real quick, guy. So I just got to put a pin in it. But
Right.
it's because they go to exploit, right? Well, we'll put a pin in it. All right, we're back. So, you were just saying about how they're used to all this traffic and all that kind of stuff. And last week we did a thing on Moloch and Metatron, the bottoms up versus the top down, and we can sort of link that to the me in the Western and the more us in the greater in the East, which is more the Metatron, right? The Moloch is more the me. And it's like a bit like that exploit versus explore kind of thing. Whereas, well, because of the way that the culture is over there, if you have tourism and you can come into that place and you can you're bringing your values and your culture, and you're sort of exploiting what's available over there. And I must admit, I've seen a lot of that over in places, especially like Thailand, like Bali, and in Indonesia as well is very similar to that. And I'm sure that there's many other places like Ibiza and places in Spain and Portugal. Like that's a very common thing, like Marbella in Spain. Like a lot of the Brits go there. And that's kind of what you notice. And that's where you have two cultures sort of colliding in a way. But it's good not necessarily. Yeah. I'll rephrase that. The good thing is that it's only temporary, right? Because it is just tourism. It's not migration. But when it starts to become migration, then that's when you can have like bigger problems start to kick off. But it does take a toll. Like I must admit, like we use Thailand and Bali as an example, right? So they start to absorb phrases and parts of the culture from the dominant tourists, if that makes sense. So if you go to Bali, there's a lot of Australians that go to Bali because it's only a 6-hour flight, and it's a beautiful place. But over there now, you'll see stores like on the side of the road where it'll be like, "G'day, mate," and like they'll say that to you to get your attention, but then they'll have like apparel or memorabilia or signs and number plates and all this sort of stuff, which would be like, "Yeah, fuck cunt," or like hella bogan. And bogan is like the hicks in America or the rednecks and that kind of stuff over in the States or even Canada. And they'll start to have these sort of colloquial terms that they absorb temporarily, or they start to utilize to sort of amalgamate with the tourism, if that kind of makes sense. Like it's a way to meet on a common ground. If that, anyway. So it's interesting to observe that. But yeah, the best thing about tourism is that the people end up leaving, but they can have a bit of a lasting effect, if kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that in many ways, there is this sort of global culture forming slowly. That's because of, the internet and social media. Because one thing you will see in every country now is oh, well, that was a good one, guy. Holy God.
Everyone's been sick and it's trying to get me. If you cannot hear, I'm not getting it, but damn.
No, you're good, guy. You're good.
That's a caption. That's the thumbnail picture. Sorry, global culture.
Yeah, sort of, right? Like obviously each country still has their unique culture, but there's also at the same time behind all that, this global culture forming. And one easy example that you can see anywhere you go is the amount of time people spend on their phones, right? People live on their phones, whether it's in Thailand, it's in Bali, in Canada, Australia. You go anywhere in the world now, like everyone is on their phone, on social media. So essentially everyone's being exposed to sort of like this global, basically it's like a globalized culture that has been created on the internet. So although people still have their unique social norms and their social culture, they also are getting another side of this global culture that's also having this influence on their day-to-day behaviors at the same time. So I find that super interesting how the internet has essentially,
and internet played a big role, but it isn't just the internet. It's actually globalization at large, right? Like it's actually that lowering the trade barriers between people being able to export and import more, and the more free trade there has been, the more amalgamation of all of that. And so are we moving towards a global government or a new world order, and that seems to be what's sort of happening, doesn't it? Like, that's an interesting thing. The interesting thing too about all of that is like so much of the tech stuff started out in like Silicon Valley. We're just dying on this pod. Nice. Started out in Silicon Valley. And a lot of that got exported out, right? So from this one central place, all of these sort of ideas and technological innovations and their sort of norms or ways of doing things has been exported out from there. And then other countries or nations have taken that and then they start to export a similar version, like same but different kind of thing. And then so it does. It kind of it spreads and permeates. But yeah, I agree with you. Definitely moving towards more of like that globalization.
There's so many interesting facets to culture, right? So we mentioned a lot of them already, like shared beliefs. And shared beliefs is a really interesting one because shared beliefs is basically like the belief in the importance of family, right? The belief in the value of hard work and productivity. And I'm just reading this from a list I have, by the way. And also a belief in the power of nature and spirituality. Okay.
But in what context are you talking about, right? Like you can have any number of different beliefs. But is this like, this is for culture or this is for...
Yeah, this is like one of the facets of culture is shared beliefs.
Yeah.
And within shared beliefs, one of them is the importance of family, right? And that one's really interesting because in Canada, generally speaking, right, with like Canadians, because there's so many cultures in Canada, but like Canadians, it is, okay, when you turn 18 years old, out of the house, on your own, right, sort of dynamic. Whereas in other countries, that's not exactly the case. And even though these days children are living at home with their parents for longer time than in comparison than in the past.
Fucking boomers.
Yeah,
we still boomers, man. With the property market, they fucked all the fucking millennials and the Gen Zs, guy.
Absolutely, guy. Absolutely.
Just fucking, but yeah, it is
partly
true.
But yeah, we're joking, but also it's true.
Yeah. They're the best jokes.
So it's interesting because family values, right? Like so many Canadians are told when you're 18, you got to go in the world and do your own thing. You got to find yourself, be on your own. this and that. Whereas other cultures, like I would say in Latin America, they're like, no, like we, like live here, be with us, stay with us, more family oriented, right? So I think that's like a really interesting difference between certain cultures. And also values. So here it says value of individualism and personal freedom. So like Western cultures, we have like this sense of freedom, and we strive to sort of try to grasp like what it is to be free. Whereas in other cultures, they're not looking for that. They're looking to be part of the greater good, right? Not thinking about their personal freedom. They're like we're part of this system, and we're gonna stay within the system, or we're gonna try and make the system better. And they're not thinking about themselves. So we're sort of coming back to that point. I just find that super interesting. And this is I think largely based on religion. Again, like I keep coming back to that, but I just think religion has this immense effect on shaping culture. Yeah. And I think the Buddhist.
Yeah, but it's because they're very much the same thing. Does that make sense? Like if you have a certain religion, well, then it's your shared beliefs of that. What a religion is a set of shared beliefs. So those things that you value or whatever, right? And then it's the same for a culture. That's what informs the culture. So they're intrinsically linked in that regard.
Are Canadians and Australians losing their culture? Sometimes you hear this from like cultured countries, that Western society doesn't have culture. What do you think that means, not to have culture or losing culture?
Yeah, that's a actually really good question. So in a sense, yes, partly because of immigration and different things, and also like, if we say that most of the Western world is kind of like, Christianity, Catholic, like all that kind of like the Bible, that kind of vibe. I think that it used to play a bigger role than it does currently. I think we've sort of lost religion in a sense in the West. Like it's sort of, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in religions. I think especially in the teachings, like in the writings and things. But if we interpret them literally, it's very problematic. But also, we've spoken about this before about power. Power is this crazy thing, and ultimate power corrupts ultimately in that sense. And so we have a lot of power, and people within these religious institutions or structures, a lot of it was abused. There's a lot of fucked up shit that happened within these religions. And so I think that poisoned it for a lot of people. Like I myself was sort of poisoned against a lot of religions because I was exposed to like a lot of the weird and fucked up shit that happened within them. And then also too, like the literal interpretations, now that we've learning more things about the universe and having different ways to test theories and hypotheses and all the rest, we can sort of like call bullshit on the fact that like, God was this guy in the sky, or, Noah's Ark, like the guy actually built this boat and he got all the animals, but then there's like no pictures of kangaroos. And then like, there's all these ways you can poke holes in that stuff because it's taught as this literal thing, as opposed to being like these stories that are meant to communicate a greater meaning, right? And that's what they should have been presented as, but then they weren't. They sort of got hijacked, and it was used as a control mechanism. But like even the stories are a control mechanism, but in a less controlling way, if that makes sense. It's more about imparting knowledge and passing wisdom along through generations, whereas they were really used as this like, serious control mechanism to get people to do these specific things that weren't really aligned with the actual meta stories that were part of the teachings. And so I think all of that plays into in the West, people losing faith and that, like losing religion, so to speak. And then I think as a byproduct of that, you lose culture. And then you have the emergence because of the sort of decline in that, or the more people becoming aware that it's a bit bullshitty the way that it's done and taught and presented, then it creates the space for other things to emerge. And so then you have these other cultures that start to emerge. And so one interesting one is gangster rap. Like gangster rap emerged, and then all of a sudden that became a culture. And that was about fucking shooting people in drive-bys and gangbanging hoes and popping bottles and and so are they losing their culture? Well, yeah, the one that they had, for sure. Will new cultures emerge? Yes, they have been. Will there be a massive trial and error phase? Absolutely. And we're going to have to go through that. But because of the old one has sort of lost its hold, then it creates the space for new ones to emerge. Will all of those be good? No. Will most of them be trash? Yes, likely. But from that, I think we've got the chance to emerge new cultures that can surpass the old cultures. And so I think it's just this continuous destruction creation cycle that is life, right? That is existence. And I think that it's an interesting thing to think about that, yes, in order to if your culture was like a local max, then getting rid of it, you might have to go into like a local min, or go downhills. But but then you have the ability to find a new global max, if that makes sense. So yes, this transition period is probably going to be, there's going to be lots of volatility. There's going to be lots of turmoil and ups and downs. But I think at the end, it creates the space for us to come up with new cultures or cultures that can surpass or supersede the previous ones we've had and lead us into a new phase of human flourishing.
I had a really interesting experience in high school, and this was like a cultural experience, actually. So where I grew up was in Cambridge, in Ontario, and the high school I went to was Monsignor Doyle. It was a Catholic high school, and it was predominantly Portuguese students there. And
Portuguese.
And a lot of the teachers were even Portuguese as well. Dude, I would say 90% of the school was Portuguese. And so you could imagine that it was heavily Portuguese Canadian culture in that high school, to the point where if you weren't Portuguese, like me, it was sometimes difficult in certain circumstances. And one thing that Portuguese students what they love to do is share stories about their mother Maria doing this, or their father Manuel doing this, or how they talked. And it was always like this big thing, like, oh, look how cultured I am, right? And because of that, I quickly realized that if I want to fit in, if I want to be considered cool, or like with the in group, that I'm going to have to adapt some of these cultural things that they are pushing, right? So it was, the music they listened to, it was the clothes that they wore, it was how they wanted to soup up their cars, how they talked, how they did their hair. Basically, dude, like high school for me was like if you watched an episode of Jersey Shore, but way before Jersey Shore. Like, Polly's Blowout?
Yeah.
I had that hairstyle in grade 9. Like 10 years before Jersey Shore came out, I was rocking that hairstyle. So, but anyways, basically Portuguese people in my mind were trying to emulate Italian culture, right? And this is sort of how I got to this conclusion, because if you were in my high school and you weren't Portuguese, you had to work really hard in order, to be cool, right? Like it wasn't easy. Like if you were Portuguese, that was like the baseline to be cool in my high school was Portuguese. However, if you were Italian, that was even better. For some reason, that was the only other culture in my high school that was considered cool automatically. But they really honored Italian people, right? So like our friend was honored in my high school just because he was Italian. And I think it's because deep down inside, all the Portuguese people in my high school knew that they were really trying to emulate the Italian culture, because they were calling themselves like Guidos basically, or Ginos they would call themselves. But Gino is an Italian word. So and so was Guido. But I actually don't think they were using the word Guido. I think it was just Gino. Like that was like the style, trying to be Gino. And they would, do the blowout hair and the big collared shirts and the pointy shoes. And it was just like Italian style, Italian music as well. They all loved football. I'm not saying like these things aren't popular in Portugal as well. But I just felt like everybody there was trying to emulate Italian culture. So basically that was also what I was trying to emulate as well. So
to assimilate, you had to assimilate into that, right? So you have to give up. This is the other crazy thing about culture and being part of a group and things is, in order to become part of that group or part of that greater whole, you have to give up part of yourself and absorbs the beliefs and the norms that they have. Now, how much of that do you think came from like the influence of media, right? So how much of them wanting to be Italian came from watching certain movies or listening to certain music or television shows or different things like that, like because mob movies were very popular back then, et cetera, et cetera. How much of the Portuguese wanting to be Italian came from their exposure to certain media?
God, that's a great point, because I mean, all we talked about was Goodfellas, Casino. I mean, Scarface as well. I mean, everyone knows Scarface is Cuban, but everyone pretended like, the Scarface was also the Italian mobster for some reason. Don't you get that as well? Like,
yeah, absolutely. No, it was just like, it was the gist of all of that was Italian.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That was like, if you're, to gangster mob person was Italian. That was just what it was. No matter what it was Italian.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That basically it was probably from a lot of things that were influencing us based on movies and shows and things that we watched.
Early media. On a side note, right? How fucking delicious are Portuguese chicken burgers? Oh my God.
Portuguese people know how to cook chicken, dude. They know. They got the recipe down 100%.
They butterfly that shit, get that sucker out flat on the charcoal, boom. And then the chicken burgers go with the sliced chicken breast fillets, and they put like a little crumb on it. It's got that lemony little zest, the Prego sauce. Oh, I'm so hungry right now.
Have you had a bifana before?
A bifana?
Yeah, bifana.
Is that like a paste? Is it a bifana or a pastry?
No, a bifana is in a Portuguese bun, and then I don't know what kind of meat it is inside, but they cook a meat with the sauce, and they just put it in this bun, and it's called bifana. But I don't know exactly.
Maybe I haven't had bifana.
What kind of meat it is. It's mad good to go, guy. Like it's delicious. Okay. And cajadas as well are good to go. But
cajadas,
it's this pastry. I think it's this pastry, cajadas. Yeah, it's really it's amazing. Portuguese food actually, or Portuguese, how do you say cuisine? Cuisine,
yeah. Portuguese tarts, guy. Oh my God, those custard tarts, they're delicious.
Those are cajadas.
Heaven.
Yeah, those are the cajadas.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, they are fucking lit. I'll smash a Portuguese tart for suresies. Okay, so one more. I have one more. Patacha tune.
But it sounds like potatoes with something.
Tuna.
What is it?
Potatoes with tuna. How do I find out about this, right? So back in my early bodybuilding days, I'm trying to eat like maximum protein, maximum carbs, minimum fat kind of thing. And I like building out my meals and stuff. And I come on, I'm like, oh, fucking potatoes and tuna. Like tuna's very low fat, good amounts of protein. Potatoes, fucking like no fat, lots of carbs, etc. Potatoes and tuna. I'll start cooking it up. So I'm cooking it up, and our mutual friend walks in. He goes, "Guy, patacha tune." And I was like, "What the fuck?" Because Portuguese. It's a very Portuguese meal. I go, really? Like, yeah, go Portuguese mad smash patacha tune. I'm like, And he goes, potatoes and tuna. And I was like, oh, that's the best name for such a shitty basic meal. Sounded so good in Portuguese. And then ever since then, it's just been potato tuna.
I love how Portuguese people talk, man. It's so funny. They're really fun.
It is.
It's a really funny culture. Like they're really, I really like Portuguese, the Portuguese culture. So it's really interesting. It's really funny. I remember in high school, so there's this word in Portuguese, it's carai. I don't know what it means. It's just like a bad word. And
carai. Isn't it like, yeah, yeah, keep going. I think I can remember.
So part of this story is how I felt super accepted in the Portuguese culture in my school. Okay, so we had to make soccer teams, and it was like a intramural soccer club, right? And the team I was on was with all of my friends, and they were mostly Portuguese and Italian, right? I was the only non-Portuguese or Italian on the team, and our team was called Wopside, right? And what's funny is the word wop is associated with Italians, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason,
but it's like a derogatory term.
Yeah. But for some reason, like the Portuguese people at my high school would call themselves wops and or Gino. So again, trying to emulate that Portuguese cultures or the Italian culture for them as well. But I remember I was worried that I wasn't going to be on the team. And then my one Portuguese friend, the one day he brings me my jersey with my name on it, and it was a Wopside jersey. And I didn't show it on my face, but I knew that at that point I was accepted into the culture 100%. And I was so goddamn happy. And there was this other team. They were called the Carais, right? The Carais. And there was announcements in the morning. And on the announcements, they were saying, okay, today it's going to be Wopside versus the Car Highs. Wopside versus the Car Highs. And everybody lost it laughing because the person who was announcing didn't realize that they were saying Carai. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like a bad word Portuguese. And what's funny is that the guy doing announcements was also Portuguese.
Yeah. That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
That's we have a joke. There's a joke over here that people will prank people and be like, this is for a Mr. Mike Hunt. The package for Mike Hunt. And then they'll be like, is there a Mike Hunt? And it sounds obviously like something else. I think that's a similar version of that joke. The person just like says it slowly. They don't even realize what they're saying. So people will just be like, oh, it's a real name kind of thing. So you mentioned about the soccer. Oh, we had damn it. I lost it.
I mentioned music, clothes, hairstyles, football, talk about mob movies.
Oh, okay. So, but you and I use some Portuguese phrasing in our conversations when we message or like when we group chat, etc., etc. So part of that culture that you grew up with at high school, right? That some of our other friends had as well, right? So part of that culture has permeated from there through you guys and into me now, because I use some of that terminology. I'm not Portuguese. I grew up around some Portuguese people, and I used to love going to the Portuguese areas in Sydney and eating Portuguese chicken burgers and Portuguese chicken and rice for sure. And I'd hang, like new Portuguese people, but not to the extent that we have it. But it's partly because that you absorb part of that culture. And then now you've taken part of that culture and you're spreading that culture, right? Because in order to, like, we have funny jokes and words that we use in our group chat that like convey certain meanings that like typical English, traditional English words don't necessarily convey the same sort of meaning, if that makes sense, or have the same effect. So we utilize those things, which is part of that culture that you were exposed to as a teenager, and that you've now left that culture, but it's stayed with you. Culture's like kind of sticky.
That's crazy. I don't know why I didn't consider that, but yeah, that's a great point. And that's another facet of culture, right? Is language as well.
100%.
And something really interesting about language groups is that I think language can actually help form a culture as well. And I've found this with myself. The Polska who speaks English is slightly different than the Polska who speaks Spanish. And I can't put my finger on it exactly. Maybe you can help me with this, but there's something about language that structures certain behaviors, and I don't really understand how. Maybe it's
concepts. It's concepts. So, well, that's part of it, right? It's probably not just concepts, but concepts play a big role in that. So in order to see something, you have to have a concept for it. In order to say to refer to something, there has to be a word for it, and the words typically point to concepts or ideas or things. What are they? Indexes. We'll do a whole thing on language. How about that? That's a good one. So, but it's those concepts, right? So you learn these different vocabulary when you're learning a new language. There's different ways of referring to things. There's different ways of speaking about things. There's different senses in which you can say something. There's different contexts that are different from your traditional language. And that changes how you perceive things, right? So it directly influences how you see about stuff. And like you just said, like the Polska that speaks English is slightly different to the Polska that speaks Spanish. But part of that is in order to communicate. Okay, interesting thing about language is it's not just the words that communicate the information. It's the body language. It's the way in which you say it. It's the expression you put on your face. It's the tone. It's all of this other nuance that goes into communicating the meaning of the word. And in order to communicate effectively in these different cultures or in these different environments, you have to learn that as well as the vocabulary. So you're a different person, essentially, like, in a sense, right? And so, yeah, I would definitely. We use the word phage all the time, which is just like a very conveniently way to say, like, you're doing something, or I would do that thing. It's just better than saying doing.
What do you think the actual meaning of phage is? Because we do use that a lot, and it's supposed to be a Portuguese word.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see what it actually means. I don't even know how I would spell it. Anyways, phage.
Phage is like do it, doing, gonna do it, like fucking do it. I don't know. It's just like all these different things tied into one. There's a mad, convenient way to say,
yeah,
do something.
Yeah, you're right. It means like to do. You're right. I just translated it. It looks like it means, yeah, to do, the verb to do.
And see, craziest thing too is like I never knew the definition of phage. I just knew the context in which it was used, and then from that I just inferred the meaning.
So remember when we were talking about how we're losing culture, or how there are certain ways that we could be losing culture because we're also losing religion. So if in Canada, Canadian people, right? Generally speaking, this is kind of a funny concept. This is another thing that I got from high school too. But this is what we would joke around about in high school, is that in high school, like if you were not Portuguese or Italian, you would be called a cake. They would be called munja cakes, right? Like white people would be called munja cakes. And the white culture.
That's an Italian thing, isn't it?
I'm not even sure.
I think that's an Italian thing. I'm pretty sure that's an Italian thing. That's a mad insult in Italian. That's a mad insult. I'm 90% sure.
So there'd be a lot of discussions about like munja cakes and what the culture of a munja cake is, right? And we would always say like they have no culture. They eat pizza bites. They eat craft dinner, even though craft dinner is good to go. Chicken fingers, you know what I mean? Bologna sandwiches, right? So like we would always joke around how like they don't have culture. And like now I'm kind of thinking about that because I haven't really thought about this in a while, but if you come from like generational Canadians, what is your culture then? Because if culture is social norms, is art, cuisine, look, I'm never going to get that word, guy. You know, it could also be
I like your version. It's good.
Religion. Yo, thanks, bro. Thank you. Right. So if they don't have like their own that thing, those things, then do they have culture? And if they do, what is their culture?
Well, they do have culture, and those things are a culture. But at the same time, it isn't like it isn't as historic. It isn't as deep in a sense, right? Like, and it's interesting you said that, because they would say like, oh, the Canadians are mungy cakes, you know, like, and you look down upon them, right? Because they don't have culture. But it's not that they don't have culture. It's just that their culture doesn't have deep roots, right? It's not deeply rooted culture. And it's interesting because even just from the outside looking in, you can see that the culture is sort of like very shallow. It's very superficial. It's sort of been hijacked by businesses and corporations and different, you know what I mean? Like they eat, like you mentioned, bologna sandwiches, you know, like that's just like an ultra processed bullshit food product that some companies decided to turn into a product. It's trash for you, right? Let's be honest. Okay. Bologna is trash. But that's what it is. It's kind of like, oh, because you didn't have these deep roots, you're easily hijacked. Like people can influence your culture so easily, and that's a bad thing. It's like you're so easily swayed by just dumb shit. You know what I mean? Whereas we've got like this deep culture. We've got our roots that we can go back to. We've been doing this for generations, you know, and that's where that kind of knowledge comes in, I think. And that's what a part of culture is that knowledge over time that people have learned. Like, you know, you look at the Mediterranean. Apologies for that. Look at the Mediterranean, you look at the Portuguese, you look at the Italians with their food, and it's because they evolved, they lived and existed in this certain environment. They learned how to get the most out of the land that they're in, but not in a way where they just fucking like raped and pillaged it, where they actually like for generations cultivated this land. They invested in the soil, they developed the systems, they developed ways to grow grapes and lemons and animals and different vegetables. And you're like, I don't know, you travel to some of these places and you just never eaten a tomato as delicious as you have when like they grew in these soils, you know, like it's a completely different thing. And there's a richness to that. There's a history there. There's these deep roots. There's this knowledge that's been passed on from generation to generation. And I think what we've observed, especially in the Western world, is like, we've drifted from that. Like, you know, British colonizers went out and did all this different stuff, and then the Americans broke away and got into America, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of like a much shallower. And some of their beliefs were very progressive in a sense. But because of that progressive, there's this development. And with that comes all the different cultures that will emerge from that. And it's going to take time to figure out like, what are the ones that are worthwhile sort of having and maintaining? They're the ones that will persist over time. That kind of makes sense. I don't know if, yeah.
Yeah, no, that does make sense.
That
does make sense. I'm sort of thinking right now, Roops, that because a lot of people in like Canadians or Americans or Australians that don't really have like those rooted cultures, like you were saying, that could be what stems or that could be the issue. Or sorry, what I'm trying to say is a lot of these social issues that we have now, like social justice warriors and trans issues, and a lot of these social issues that have been coming out could be stemming from individuals trying to find an identity because they don't have a deep-rooted culture. And if they
Correct.
did have a deep-rooted culture, would they still be going out there trying to find these obscure identities?
I think less likely, definitely less. I think it would still happen. It just wouldn't happen at the rate that it is happening. I think it's because, like we said, because they've sort of lost those deep roots, they're free to go out and explore possibility space. Turns out that most of possibility space is pretty trash, and that the constraints of having those older cultures was pretty decent. But what it does do is create the space to find new cultures that will be able to supersede and surpass the previous ones. I do believe it. I do believe that. And that's that explore versus exploit, like if you're tied to a certain culture, you're sort of exploiting that to some degree. And then the new things that are emerging are these explores. And yeah, most of it's not going to be that great, but because we're exploring, we have the chance of finding things that will take us to new heights and, develop society further and, positive directions and all the difference. But there still will be downsides to that. Like, again, these people that essentially sort of lost and don't have that identity in some sense. And, somebody might stumble across something that's an incredibly valuable way to perceive, or a valuable culture to have, a valuable identity to define. But there's still going to be attrition. Like it's not everything's going to be a perfect. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well said, dude. Well said. All right, Guy. Conclusion.
Culture and religion, I think, are very heavily tied together, which is interesting. And it comes down to that shared system of beliefs. You've got the physical and the non-physical aspects of it. And I think it is for us, the age that we live right now, it's for us to challenge certain things and to try and look at cultures that exist and that have existed. What are the useful aspects of those cultures, and how could we take that and combine them together and combine them with new things to come up with cultures that can take us beyond where we've been, if that makes sense. And I think there's an interesting opportunity in modern times to do that because we have lost so much. And I would use the analogy of topsoil versus the deep-rooted, and I think in the Western world, we could say that, the culture is very much like a topsoil. There isn't a lot of substance there, whereas some of these other cultures that have been around for longer have these deep roots. And it's a testament to the type of culture that they've had, that they've persisted for so long. And yeah, I think we're in a transition period. I think we're in a transition period where we've got the opportunity to come up with new ones. And you can see it if you look on social media or even around. There's lots of new cultural norms popping up. How long will they last? My guess is not very long. And I'm hoping to see the better ones emerge over time.
Please remember to like and subscribe, and please share the video, guys, and comment, or don't comment, actually.
Yeah, I'm going with inverses. Don't like, don't subscribe, don't even watch the content. Don't share it with people that you like or you hate. Fucking don't do anything, okay? Try that.
I think it'll work, Guy. I think it'll work.
That was fun. Hopefully, next week, I'm definitely not going to sound like this because this is only lasting for today. This is gone after today. Bye-bye. I don't get sick. Fuck this.
Oh, you sound beautiful, bro. Don't worry about it.
I sound like the nanny named Fran. Do you remember that show?
What show is that?
The nanny named Fran. I don't know. It was a show that was back in the day. She was a nanny for like some rich dude in America. She was like Italian. She had a big nose. I like a nasal voice.
Yeah. I don't
think
This is
how I feel like I sound.
I don't think I've
seen it. I'll send you a clip. Don't worry.
All right, Guy.
No, that was fun. That was interesting, actually. I enjoyed that conversation. But
Me too.
Definitely definitely don't subscribe, you fuckers. Don't share it with people. Don't do anything. Have a great rest of the day, Guy. You enjoy your night. Good chat.
Thanks, bro.
Love
you,
lots.
dude. Peace.
Peace.